So we're sitting here, it's Parshas Vayetze, we're a couple weeks before Hanukkah. We're starting to get into winter. It's a little bit of rain around here. And I'm thinking about, if we only have a few moments together, and I always think about this whenever there's an opportunity to share with any group, when you have one thing to say, like what is it that you're going to speak about? What are we going to talk about? What are we going to share? And I feel like what we're going to do over our next little bit together is fundamental. It's primary when it comes to living, and we're gifted with an opportunity to go into it. So there's this book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. It was written by a woman named Bronnie Ware. She was a hospice nurse, and she spent many, many years working with people side by side towards the end of life. Along the way, she started asking people what they regret. What are the things they held on to, or the things they wish they held on to more along the way. And she compiled a list of about 5 things that in one form or another, people said at the very end, this was what was real, this was what was important, and somehow I let it slip, or I didn't grab onto it as much as I'd like to. So I'm going to read them to you directly from her words, so that we're to stay true to what she says. She said the first one is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. The second was, I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. I wish that I had let myself be happier. And the last one, really gets me. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. So here are these 5 big things, major things that stood out to people towards the end of their life. And when you really boil them down, again, it's, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. I wish I allowed myself to be happier. And I wished that I allowed myself to live a life that was true to me and myself, and not the life that others expected of me. When you really boil them down, we start to think about what's really real to people. I hear 3 things that stand out strong, which is that your soul is important, your essence, your sense of self is valued, and sometimes we put it aside for something external. Our joy, our happiness is valued, it's real, and sometimes we put that aside for something we think is more important. And then human connection, which of course leads into both. It allows us to be a mirror to ourselves, and it's the joy of life, is the love that we share with others. And so when I think about what's real, what really is real in this world, there's a line in a book that I love, a book called A Course in Miracles, that says that which is real can never be threatened. That which is unreal doesn't exist. And herein lies the peace of God. That's so profound to me. That which is real can never be threatened. Meaning there's something on the inside, and we all know it, and we all intuit it. And the world tells us that the unreal, which doesn't really exist, meaning not that it's not something physical, not that it doesn't truly exist in the world, but that it doesn't have permanence in that same way. And yet that grabs our eye. And if we can somehow get clear on what the difference between those 2 things are, between what's real and what's unreal, that's where we find peace. That's where we find that love, that joy, that spiritual connection that's waiting for us. And it was always there. So we're here. It's Parshas Vayetze. The Parsha opens up with Yaakov. He's leaving his home. He's on the run. He is starting this new life. The opening verse says, Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheva vayelech Harana, that Yaakov, he left from, there's a city called Beersheva, and he went to this other city called Haran. Now, of course, everything in Torah has both a true and practical, pragmatic, logical reality, as well as a deep, mystical, philosophical, spiritual reality. So Beersheva, the city, also means Be'er is a well. Yeah, a well is something that you dig. You work hard at it, and you dig and you dig and you dig until you find the water that's underneath. And Sheva, 7, is always a reflection in Torah. It's the number that points to completion in the physical world. There are 7 days of the week. There are 7 notes in a musical scale. There are 7 colors in the spectrum, in the rainbow spectrum. Waves come in 7s. 7 is a number that always is going to reflect a level of completion and wholeness. And so the idea was he was coming from a world of, he was dug deep. He was connected to the wellspring of this reality. In Hasidus and some of the deeper works, they write that Be'er-Sheva was a reference to Shabbos. That on Shabbat, that's a time when we've dug deep, that we got deep, we have an opportunity to go deeper into ourselves and to touch that natural flow that comes through us because we give ourselves some space. So that Yaakov was coming from that which was real, but he was leaving that. He was leaving that which was real to enter into this other space called Haran. Haran comes from the word Haron, which means anger or frustration, resentment, resistance. Yeah, it has a negative connotation. And so he was going from this place of clarity, from this place of happiness and joy, and he's entering into a world of frustration, a world of going uphill. And that's where we find him in the beginning of the Parsha. And the kind of the whole Parsha, all the way up until the very end, is his battle with the mundane, his battle with the day-to-day. It's the first time, every scene we have with Yaakov up until now, he's this person, he's a yeshiva bacher. He's been sitting and learning and studying and meditating and davening and praying. And he's a spiritual being, constantly living in spiritual rapport. And now he's on the road and he's entering the world. That's why one of the first scenes we see in the Parsha is he gets this vision, this dream of Jacob's ladder, right? We all know Jacob's ladder. The vision is you've got this ladder, the feet are on the ground, the top of the ladder goes all the way up to the heavens, and there are these angels going up and down. And of course, the symbolism couldn't be more clear that God was telling Jacob that as we go into the world, as you enter into life, and we want to live in the world, life is not about being completely ascetic and being disconnected from reality, but to permeate reality and to come in, we ourselves have to be, and he himself has to be the ladder, right? That connects heaven and earth, that connects deep ideas and philosophies with practical application and expression, to go deep into a soul understanding and to work to feel it and to process it and express it. So Jacob is this ladder. He's finding himself in the world of the mundane, and he has to figure out, how do I stay connected to what's real? How do I stay connected to the joy of my soul, the natural essence of my being, the connection to God and to the essence of reality? As I'm out there trying to make money and trying to be with my wife and kids and trying to raise a family and trying to, take out the trash, all of the what looks like the mundane muckery of the world is filled with spiritual opportunity. So that is the battle of the Parsha. And we're, for those who will sit with it, you'll see as it goes on and on and on, the story is challenging and frustrating. I was sitting with someone once. Someone made a connection to me and this, we'll call him John, a certain billionaire. Was the first billionaire I'd ever met, and he said, "I want you to sit with this person, and I think that what you have to say, the wisdom and the Torah and your vision, everything is going to sit with him. I think that he'll want to help support the work that you're doing, your books and the videos and this. You guys really should connect." And I said, "Okay, I'm happy to meet with him." So we got on a call together. And this is many, many years ago. And he says, "Okay, Rabbi, teach me something." So I said, "Okay, I'd like to teach you about happiness. Can we talk about happiness?" And he says, No, can't do happiness." So I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because I don't believe in happiness." So I said, "I don't even know what that means." Like, what do you mean you don't believe in happiness? Like, because some people are happy, right? And sometimes you're more happy and sometimes you're like, and he stops me and he goes, "I don't believe in happiness. Some people are born happy, others are born unhappy. That's where the conversation ends. Let's talk about something else." So as a young, idealistic, naive excited rabbi. I was like, no, let me tell you, neuroscience says like this, psychology says like that, Kabbalah says like this, the Gemara says like that, and I'm one by one showing him, you see all these different ways and the reasons and this and that, and 20 minutes later, he was basically done with me and done with the conversation, and that was it. So he became my metaphor for a long time of what it means to be able to have access to everything out in the world and still lack the thing on the inside that says, you could have a thought, I don't believe in happiness. No matter what's going on, I'm not deserving of that, or I'm not worthy of that. And there's one of my favorite lines in the whole Gemara in the Talmud. In Hebrew, it says, Da kanisa ma chasarta, da chasarta ma kanisa. In English, that means, if you have awareness, what do you lack? If you lack awareness, what do you have? That means that there's two ways to go through this world. It's very profound, right, when you think about those words, because what it means to say is there's some form of awareness, some consciousness that if you have that, you'll go through life with the feeling of what do I lack? Meaning I have it all, right? There's an inner connection to something that if I have awareness of what that is, I'm connected to that and I'm conscious of it and I carry that with me, then no matter what I have or don't have, I feel like, what do I lack? And yet if I lack that awareness, if I lack the connection to that place, then no matter what I gain, I might walk around with the feeling or the perception of what do I have? Right? What have I achieved? What have I done? Constantly missing, and then back in the striving and the pushing and the trying to get somewhere. And that's the world of charon. That's the world of resistance and striving and pushing, of being in the world but not feeling connected to that deep wellspring on the inside. And so for many years he was my metaphor of dachasar tamakanisa. If you can have all the things in the world, but if we're lacking a deeper consciousness, we can feel like we're missing it all. There is a happy ending to that story. He called me up a couple years later and he said, Reb Moshe, I just want to tell you, you were right. I said, right about what? And he said, since our last conversation, somebody had given me a copy of your book. It's all the same to me. And I read it, and to my surprise, I finally understood what you were trying to tell me. And he said, for the first time in my life, I really feel a level of unconditional happiness. And I'm so grateful. And that started a beautiful long dialogue and a series of learning together. But for me, in that moment, it shifted totally, because he then became the paradigm and the metaphor in my mind for the individual who, you see, he was 80 years old. It means it's never too late. You see, it doesn't matter where we are in the journey. It doesn't matter how old we are in our journey, because age is just a number. And so we're all trying to figure out how to get to what's real, how to get to what matters. You know, I'm not going to force everyone off their muted. So a lot of people here are muted, but if we were all sitting together, I would ask if happiness, if you believe it was a luxury or a necessity. Yeah. And I'm sure we'd have a nice, interesting conversation around that. Is happiness a luxury or is it a necessity? But I'd like to pose it in another way. If I were to ask you if your soul is a luxury or a necessity, so how would you answer that question? And whether you're thinking luxury or necessity right now, I want to let you know it was a trick question, because it's neither, right? Your soul is not a luxury or necessity. It's who you are. It's something you are, not something you have. And the Shem Mishmul, one of the great Hasidic Rebbes, said that happiness is the quality of the soul. It is what one experiences when they're in touch with themselves. And so happiness is not something you ever have. It's something you are. And this whole thing is a matter of, well, how much you are you? How much you is there? How much you are present in your experience? And so when I think about happiness, the first time I really went down the road of trying to figure out what the Torah's perspective on happiness was, I was a yeshiva bacher, so now we're going back, close to 20 years. I just left a 7-year career as the singer-songwriter in a rock band. We were signed to a record label. We were, on the radio and MTV, and it was a whole world. That's another story for another time. And I had left that world. I came to yeshiva, and it was one of the first few weeks in yeshiva. We had learned this concept, which was whenever something shows up for the first time in the Torah, so that is the spiritual DNA. It's like the imprint of whatever that concept means. So the first time we see the word goodness, tov, it's associated with light, right? So light and goodness are associated together, right? Our minds are putting them together all the time, but they also show up together for the first time in the Torah. And so during those first few weeks, I was sitting with my chavrusa, the person who I was spending a long time learning with, and it had come up in conversation. Well, I wonder where the first time happiness comes up in Torah. Like, where do we find happiness for the first time? Simcha. Like, if we can find the first time it says simcha in Torah, we can find the deep secret to happiness, right? And what are we all about? What are we all doing here? What are we trying to get to? And parenthetically, like, if we really, really think about it and we boil it down, it doesn't take waiting till our deathbed to figure out what life is about. Everyone's running after the same thing. It doesn't matter who you are, race, color, or creed, doesn't matter how old. We are looking for, and call it different words, that joy, that happiness, that love, the peace, the fulfillment, the feeling of success, that wholeness. It's all the same thing in different words. We all want to feel good, knowing that we are good and that life is good. There's something deeply satisfying when we get to that place. And so I was trying to figure out, what is the secret to happiness? And as fate would have it, we figured out that of all places, it was in this week's Parsha. Yeah? At the very end of this internal struggle that Yaakov has. You see, Yaakov comes down, he leaves his wellspring, he goes down to Haran. What is he doing there? He's getting married, he's having children, he's starting to work, but he's got this father-in-law who is the worst. And I don't just mean like colloquially, I mean like really one of the worst people. And his name's Lavan. And Lavan in Hebrew means white. And he's the master of the white lie. He's the master of covering himself up, of making him look like he's an angel, making himself look like he's a good guy in the story, when the whole time he's trying to swindle everyone, manipulate everyone, control everyone. And he's like the ego incarnate. Really, really not a good person to be around. But he was probably a lot of fun to be with because he came off as like a really good time. And everybody thought he was great, and he clearly had a lot of people who looked up to him. Yaakov saw straight through him, but he knew that he was a trickster. And so over there, the sages tell us that, the moment he realized that Lavan was a ramai, a liar, he said, well, when in Rome. And he takes on also this persona of like, well, if you're going to use trickery with me, I'll have to use trickery with you. And he rationalizes deviating from his nature. With Yaakov is the pillar of truth in Torah. Everything about him is, he stands for Torah, he stands for truth, he stands for all things good and true. And so for him to be in this place, he was constantly in this battle. And then at some point, he can't take it anymore. God realizes it's time for him to go. And so God comes to him and says, okay, it's time. You can't live this way anymore. He's stealing money from you. He's, taking advantage of your property. This is not good for you. It's not good for your wives. It's not good for your kids. It's not good for anybody. It's time for you to leave. And so he goes home and he tells his family, and in the middle of the night, they essentially escape. They get up and run away. And then Lavan chases after them. He gets wind that they're gone, and then he finally catches them. Like, it's this chase, and then he gets there, and when he finally shows up, he goes up to Yaakov. Lavan comes up to Yaakov and he tells him, why did you guys run away in the middle of the night? Had you just told me, I would have sent you besimcha. I would have sent you happily. And that's the first time that simcha appears in the Torah. That's the first time joy and happiness appear in the Torah. And it's the craziest thing because it's in this weird scene of like, escaping in the middle of the night. And it's coming from Lavan, who's a liar. And in fact, in that moment, is lying. Like, there's no way he would have sent him happily, right? Like, everything about him was trying to keep his family close and to take all the things from Yaakov and his family. So, like, he wasn't going to send him away happily. That wasn't going to go easy. So, what is the secret? So I went up to my Rebbe at the time and I said, this is my question. How do we answer? What is the secret to simcha? And he looked at me and he said, that is a great question. I don't know. Let me know if you ever get an answer. So, and by the way, this was like, I'm a new yeshiva guy, and this is a person who's proven to know all of Torah. So, like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, don't rabbis know the answers to everything? Like, which, by the way, 20 years later, as a rabbi, you're like, everybody assumes, like, oh, you're a rabbi, so you have to know the answer to everything, and everything you've ever, seen. Okay, so he didn't know. What are you going to do? And about a year later, there was another really, really big rabbi that came in from America. Rav Feldman was in town. And he was the head rabbi, the Rosh Yeshiva of Ner Yisrael. And I thought, okay, I'm going to ask him this question. And I go up to him because he was giving a class on simcha, on happiness that day. And so I walked up to him and I asked him this question. I said, Lavan, and he's a liar, and he's this, and he's that. And what's the secret to happiness? What's the foundational idea to happiness in Torah that we're learning from here? And he looked at me and he says, that's a great question. I don't know. Let me know if you ever find an answer. So I was like, man, that's two strikes. Like, I got to figure this out. And I was looking everywhere, and every year we'd come back to the same parsha, and like another 2 or 3 years went by, not getting any clarity, had my own thoughts, but couldn't make sense out of it. And then one year there was the bris milah, and right at the end of the bris milah, it was the person who was holding the baby at the time was Moshe Shapiro. Rabbi Moshe Shapiro was probably one of the deepest thinkers of the 20th century. He passed away about 10 years ago. And aside from being a major tzaddik and a gadol, a huge huge person, and he was a teacher of many of the rabbis, of writers and speakers of our time. So he was there, and I grabbed him right afterwards and I said, Rabbi, I've got this question. Been sitting with it for years. Can I ask you this question? And he said, sure. I said, what's the secret to happiness that we're learning at the end of this parsha, right? We've got Yaakov, he goes down, it's Haran, he's in this darkness, and he's got this dream, and then he finally goes down, he's with Lavan, and Lavan's the bad guy, and he's the source of happiness. Like, what is the secret? And he looked at me, and I'm telling you, he smiled so wide, ear to ear. I'm saying like ear to ear. The man was shining. He was like, what a good question. What an amazing question. What an unbelievable question. And I was so afraid he was going to follow that up with, I don't know. Let me know when you find the answer. And he said, do you want to know the answer? And I was like, yeah, I do. And he said, okay, listen to this. There's a verse in Tehillim that says, Or zaru l'tzaddik u'leyishre lev simcha, that light is planted for the righteous, but for those who are straight of heart, there is joy. He said, those who can be yashar, those who can be aligned, to live in alignment, to be straight and not deviate from the truth of who they are, they live in joy. They live in true happiness, in deep simcha. And he said, realize what was going on. Yaakov had just spent 2 decades, we're talking 20 years, of living in this other world that he wasn't used to. And of course he had to be there, right? No one's saying he wasn't in the right place. But he changed himself. He molded himself to the outer reality instead of the other way around. He cared more about how you fit within the system and less about what his internal guidance and system was. And maybe that was for good reason. But what was lost along the way was a sense of innate joy. And so if Yaakov is the pillar of truth, and Lavan is the pillar of what it means to live in the white lie, which is find me over here, that's where you're going to find happiness. Happiness is with me, right? So the first time we see joy, it's from the side of the world that says, you're going to find joy out here. You're going to find joy in the lie. You're going to find joy in the thing that says you have to conform to something outside, to some social media algorithm, to some political party, to some feeling of whatever's going to make you feel good on the outside. That's the first time we see it. We actually see the way that it shows up. It actually first shows up from the dark side. That's what, as we grow into this world, we don't see the truth. He says, but what's actually happening in that moment? What's actually happening in that moment is the very last conversation that Yaakov has with Lavan. And he said, it's called Predas Yaakov from Lavan. It is the separation of Yaakov from Lavan, the separation of the self from the ego, the separation of the self from the part of the mind that says, I need to be something else and someone else for someone else, right? It is that part that was separating and returning to self. And that's the birth of joy in the world, because the birth of true simcha, of true joy, is the ability to actually walk away, to confront the part of you that wants to say, okay, let me just bend. Let me just compromise. I'll be a little different. I'll do something else for someone else, and slowly chip away at your identity. Whereas the depth of authentically living as an expression of yourself is the truth of joy. And he says that's why right after this experience, the very next piece, like literally the very next chapter, as you come out of the separation of Yaakov from Lavan, Yaakov ends up in the famous battle. He fights with the angel and comes out victorious with a new name. And his name is what? His name is Yisrael. He's going to go from this parsha into the parsha of getting his new name. And Yisrael means Yashar El, to be straight and connected to God, to be living in alignment. That is what it means to be Yisrael, is to be so clear and connected to who you are and what you stand for and what life is, that you allow yourself to be an expression of that in the world. And with that comes joy, because nothing will steal your joy more than the idea that you need to be anything other than yourself. That's the root. The root of everything is, from the very beginning, God's been trying to get this point across. I mean, all the way back to Avram Avinu. All the way back in the beginning, you take a man like Avram, spends his entire life looking for God. Like Avram's, first monotheist, he's trying to bring this, popularize this new idea that, there's a God. And he's looking for God and looking and looking and looking. When he finally gets there, he finally finds God. The very first verse, God looks at Avram and says, Lech lecha, go to yourself. You're looking for me? Did you look inside? Did you look in yourself? Like the God you're looking for, the joy you're looking for, the love you're looking for, it's all inside of you already. But are you willing to embrace that? Are you willing to hold that and make that real? For me, there was a point in my own spiritual journey. This was probably around 6 or 7 years into my yeshiva career. I went through a pretty hard time myself. It was what I would call a dark night of the soul. Solid year or two. I was still, learning 10, 12 hours a day. And then I was, any extra time, I had some time with my wife, and I had a newborn at the time. I was teaching a little bit, but I found myself really disconnected. I found myself feeling far from myself, far from God. And it was a weird thing because, again, being a musician before, I felt very guided. I felt very intuitively plugged in, connected. I would see signs in everything, always following the guidance, following the different signs and symbols that would show up for me in my life. And it was so clear. I had such a deep, clear connection to God. So clear that I got up and left it and went to a yeshiva and moved to Jerusalem. And then I'm 7 years into studying Torah all day and praying 3 times a day. And you would think at that point, You can't be more connected. And I felt somehow unplugged. And it was a dark space. It was very strange. And at the time, I sat with one of my rabbis, an incredible mentor of mine, who so grateful, so grateful. I would share with you his name, but he asked me to not share this story in public with his name. But I sat with him, and I told him everything that I was going through, and he looked at me, and he said, "Oh, that makes total sense." And I said, "Well, how does that make sense to me? It makes no sense at all." And he said, "No, it makes sense because there are kind of two types of people in this world." It's like there are head and body people, people who like to think deeply and to practically express. He said, and there are heart and soul people, people who are naturally rooted in, deep emotion and spirituality. And he's like, you're a musician, you're a creative, you're a heart and soul kind of person, and you found yourself in a head and body kind of world, right? The yeshiva world loves to intellectualize and philosophize and to think deeply, and then we're going to worry about our behaviors much more than we're going to worry about, kind of like the feeling, spiritual connection on the other side. So he said, of course you're feeling a little bit disconnected. He's like, it's the best thing that ever happened to you. And I was like, why? How is that the best thing that ever happened to me? I was like, this is, I enjoy all of it, but I'm feeling disconnected. He's like, yeah, but since it wasn't natural, sometimes in life, you're brought to this other place, which is not natural, which can bring up resistance and friction and challenge, but you gained all of those skill sets. You have this now beautiful connection to Torah you wouldn't have gotten to otherwise. He said, but now, if you want to find your joy, it's like you need to turn back and find yourself within the context of Torah, but there's a you that's lost in there. And when you find it, you'll find that joy again. And so I asked him how he suggested I find it. And for him, he told me that I should go look into the world of Kabbalah and Hasidus, which are the deeper, more mystical, spiritual side of Torah. And I did, and I fell in love with everything I found there. But kind of like as a practical takeaway from all of this, that is the question, which is how do we get more of that joy? How do we, if the answer to joy is being more authentic and being more yourself, so how do you find more of yourself? How do we spend more time there? So Rav Dessler, Rav Eliyahu Dessler, which was Rabbi Moshe Shapiro's Rebbe, right? So now we're going back a couple generations. So when he was asked this question, he said, there are three things you can do to help find yourself. And of course, when you find yourself, you find your love, you find your joy, you find your peace. He says, the first one is, it's a recognition of the mindset that naturally we're in the world of taking, trying to get something from the world, which is the ego. And he says, if you can catch that and then flip it over and be in a state of overflow, where the desire is not to take, but to figure out where you can give and where you can serve, you will find yourself in that. Because you're not trying to fill yourself with that feeling of, I'm missing, right? Like we said in the beginning, if you lack awareness, what do you have? So if you see yourself grabbing at the world, that itself is an indication that you don't have yourself. So even just starting there, starting to reorient oneself from the world of grabbing, taking, needing, gripping reality to softening and finding a way to flow into reality, that's a step. It's one of three things he said. So the second thing is called hisbodedus, which simply translated means meditation. Yeah, spending time in quiet, spending time alone, literally hitboded. Hitboded means to go be alone. And it doesn't mean be alone from others necessarily. It means be alone from that ego. It means separate yourself from the part of you that is constantly telling you that you need to be different, that your life's not good enough the way it is, that who you are is not good enough the way you are. But it's that same voice that leads a person to all these regrets at the end of their life, saying, I wish I stayed in touch with my friends. I wish I didn't work so hard. I wish I allowed myself to be happier. I wish that I let myself live the life that's true to me and not the one that others expected of me. There is a voice that's telling us all the time that we have to be different. But when a person can get quiet, in that quiet, they start to see the voice as just a voice in their head. It's not who you are. It's just a pattern that we picked up over time. And he said the third thing is a reorientation around the difference between being motivated to achieve and just being inspired to be. in Hebrew it says a rotzeh lish, instead of having a ratzon lishof, a ratzon lihiot, instead of a desire to go and achieve something or do something in the world, it's shifting from pure doing to one of being. Just being in that state of being, that's enough. It is enough. It doesn't mean that now you sit at home and do nothing. It just means that what's behind everything, right? Are you doing things for joy, or are you doing them from joy? Are you doing things for peace, or are you doing things from peace? It's just shifting the orientation. Where are we coming from? What are we rooted in? And it's saying, if we can be in a state of abundance and overflow, if we can find some quiet and dissociate, kind of move, take a step back and see the voice in our head that's telling us to look outside for happiness and to actually just embody the state of being instead of constantly needing something from the outside to validate our existence. In that, you find joy because there's nothing else you need. Da kanisa ma chasarta. If you have this, you will feel, what do I lack? So there's worlds and worlds of depth to go further into this, but that's how we end the Parsha. The Parsha begins with Yaakov leaving this Be'er Sheva, but it ends with him coming home. Yeah? It begins with him saying, okay, I'm going to come into this world. Yes, I want to be involved in my business. Yes, I'm going to be involved with my family. Yes, I'm going to be in the world. But my job is to figure out how to bridge heaven and earth. My job is to try to figure out, how do I bring consciousness into my being? How do I bring presence into my reality? How do I bring joy into the way that I show up and serve? And find myself in that place. And in finding oneself, we find that joy. So I give us all a bracha, a real blessing, that no matter where we are, no matter when we are, we have the opportunity to lean into that, to deepen our sense of self, to deepen our sense of internal quiet from the ego that says somewhere else is better than this. And I'm happy to dialogue and to open this up for questions, thoughts, and responses. But that's where we are. I can hear you a little bit. Can you dial that up a little bit?
Better? So what would you say are some practical applications to always have that, like, you have that moment of inspiration? How can we take that and live with it constantly?
Yeah, so first of all, I think part of, I get that question a lot, which is like, how do we integrate this in such a way where I'm constantly living there? And it's not like there's a tool, right? I think if we're looking for a tool, we're going to actually miss it, right? This isn't about, okay, if I think about this 7 times a day, or if I do this 12 times a day, or if I go to, if I drink this juice and I do that yoga thing, and then I'm going to be happy. Those are tools that help in terms of trying to unlock this. But really what we're talking about is taking time on a regular basis to investigate oneself, to be with self. When I ask people, when's the last time they sat for an hour and without a phone, without a book, without a person, yeah, just by themselves. And I'm not saying that you should go take an hour now and do this, because it is a big investment. But go sit and just be with yourself and to see what comes up in your own mind. Most people, the answer is, I don't know, maybe not ever, right? Like, we don't really spend time with ourselves. We're so inundated with our phones and with our work and our jobs and with our families. Life is so busy that finding quiet, and I don't just mean like a 10-minute guided meditation, but to really sit and to figure out, who am I really? What makes me tick? That's how you start to find it. It's deeper. Like, I'm thinking about not too long ago, a couple years ago, I was at this event with Jordan Peterson, and somebody had asked him this question about having a gratitude practice. And he said, I'm not against having a gratitude practice, but I am going to tell you that if you try to make yourself touch the place that true appreciation has by having a gratitude practice, you'll miss it, because gratitude is fundamentally a different way of looking at the world. It's a complete identity shift. It's actually moving into a space of seeing that everything is good, right? So yes, we can be thankful for all the small things along the way, but the real shift is, oh my God, I'm on a rock floating through space going a gazillion miles an hour, and there's an atmosphere, and thank God, like I exist, and I don't even need to exist, and nothing needs to be this way, and the sun is exactly where it needs to be, and the moon is exactly where it needs to be. You know, if the sun's any further away, we freeze. If it's any closer, we burn. If the moon is, I mean, like everything is perfect. So it's an orientation of appreciation, right? It's more than just a practice. And I would say the same is true here, right? What we're looking for in the inspiration is, can we start to work on reorienting the way we see ourselves, that ourselves are truly good, truly godly, and an extension of light. That's really what it is, right? So if we want to be really practical about it, I would say, do we spend time listening to people, podcasts, reading books that remind us of that? Do we spend time in quiet remembering that? Do we spend time in places that bring out the best in us? Those are going to kind of be the outer kind of practical things that could help lead us there. But it's about remembering that you're already all the things you're looking for. The light you seek to find, you are.
If I'd like to ask a question, if I may. First off, I want to say it's very good to see you. I don't know if you remember, you may not, but way back in the day when I was Fox at the Steinberg, I saw you play Living Waters and all that. It's good to see you, and thank you. I have a question. You made a very interesting point about Abraham and Jacob. That Abraham left Lechat, come to himself. Jacob had to go to Haran and then come back in a way to Beersheba or Israel. Was there a similar process for Isaac, or Isaac, because he never left Israel, maybe he didn't have to go on this kind of battle or journey?
Awesome question. And yeah, you're absolutely right and intuited correctly. So Isaac has a different life path than both Avram and Yaakov. And all three have obviously their own journeys. But Isaac's is emphasized. It's marked by the fact that early on, right, he's already a human being that goes through his challenge with his father when he goes through the binding of Isaac, right? So his challenge is he going to be willing to completely sacrifice himself for the higher reality? And once he's able to get beyond that, he's actually doesn't live with that same ego the way that other people live with anymore. Because once you get to the point that you're willing to sacrifice not just your emotional ego, but your physical body, you're a different person. You're a changed human. And so the vast majority of Isaac's life is, the binding of Isaac happens when he's 40. So he then spends the next 140 years in a post-bound world, right? A world that is transcended. So he lives in this more transcendent space. It's one of the reasons why his name is Isaac. Isaac comes from, Yitzchak means to laugh, right? So he's like laughing at reality, where we're taking everything so seriously. Like he's laughing. We find him laughing in there's not very many verses around Isaac's life, but he's already made the transcendent experience to say, I'm not going to take life as seriously as everybody else is taking it, and in doing so, I'm going to live in that connection. So he doesn't even have to leave. He never leaves Israel because he left it the moment that he made this decision to transcend. Yeah, that was a great question.
Anybody else? Maybe in the meantime, Rabbi Gersht, you could.
No, I was going to ask if I can jump in. It's Mo Koisman. How are you, Rabbi Gersht? I was learning something this week that this reminded me of, or connected to, that I thought maybe I'd share. You know, in the beginning of the parsha, when it says "V'shafti b'shalom el beit avi, v'haya Hashem li le'elokim," it's saying like the obvious question there is what he's saying is he returns. Yaakov says, when I return in peace to my father's house, Hashem will be my God. And the obvious question is, what? Hashem's not your God now? Like only when you return will Hashem be your God? And there's this whole connection. Everybody asks the question, Rashi, Ramban, etc. But I thought there's something so interesting about how it bookends his experience with prophecy on the front end and on the back end. And this is prophecy in a dream, which is interesting. Only the second time in the Torah after Avimelech, which is another topic for another day. But it was talking about this connection to who he is, his true self, his self in the land of Israel. And it was about knowing God at a higher level, that prophecy in Israel is on a higher level than prophecy outside, and it also dovetails with your point about how we yearn to fit in and we take on the customs of others. So I thought it was just interesting in that the front end and the back end sort of make the same point, and it connects together quite elegantly.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me also that you bring it out, which is, it is this whole parsha, this whole story is really a story of a person who was living in the light, but the light wasn't perfected yet in such a way where it wasn't worth going down into the world to then go through a deeper refinement process. And he actually comes out with a higher level of prophecy on the other side. And it's not going to be an accident that higher prophecy comes with more joy. Right? We know throughout all of Chazal, it says that Ruach HaKodesh, having the Holy Spirit, getting to these deeper states of understanding and connection, these higher transcendent periods, they come as a result of happiness. In fact, the famous prophet Yonah, right, which we read on Yom Kippur, right, he wasn't always a prophet, right? Yonah was a regular person. And then it says he went to the Beit HaMikdash on Sukkot, which is the time of happiness. And during that time, there was so much joy that happened, he literally fell into an ecstatic new reality and became a prophet, coming out of the joy. So it makes sense, the way that you're connecting it, which is once he's gone through the struggle, once we've gone through our own personal journeys, and you find the light at the other side, not only are you happier, but you are more spiritually adept because of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Yes. You do it to Hashem b'simcha. Yeah.
Where can people find out more about happiness, meditation, stuff that you're doing?
I mean, happiness and all of that is all inside oneself. So if you want to know more about that, we got to go inside. But if you want to know more about what I'm doing, my stuff is easy. It's MosheGersht.com, has everything over there. All my social media places. My books are on Amazon. Happy to dialogue with anybody personally. If there's anybody, if I said anything, or if you just want to go deeper into this, happy to create some space. I'm super happy that this group even exists. I know I'll take a moment here just to thank Cher for putting this all together, all the people that go into making this thing run. It's really, really special, and the opportunity to come and to share at a deep level is amazing. I actually was really torn between two really, really important pieces of Torah in this week's Parsha. And so I went with joy. But gosh, if we have another time, this time next year, guys, wow, if you knew the Torah that exists in the world of Joseph's name, what it means to have the name Yosef, what it means to have the name Joseph, and that entire world, there is so much depth. I'm telling you, like, we could be here all day. It's amazing, and it will change your life. It will change. It changed my life. I've been thinking about, I couldn't believe it because this whole download of a reality around Joseph came down right before Rosh Hashanah for me. And I was focusing on happiness and simcha for this particular time together. And I've been sharing this idea about Yosef for like the last, 6-7 weeks. And it only dawned on me an hour ago that I was like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the parsha that I've been speaking about for 6 weeks. I have to share it with them. But Hashem said that we'll have to find more time together afterwards. Maybe I'll write it up and send it to you guys or something.
We can go to overtime.
I would love to. I'd love to. I have another group not long after this. But yes, I'm happy to come back. We can go deeper into these ideas at another time. But really, really grateful to get some time together. Appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to come learn some Torah together. And we should be blessed to find exactly what it is that we're here to see in our personal journeys, whether we find ourselves in a Be'er Sheva, the wellspring of wholeness, whether we find ourselves in the Haran, in the frustrations of the challenges, the frictions of life, but regardless, come out the other side with more joy, more clarity, and like you said, with a deeper connection to God, and I'll move forward together.